Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. It's Thomas Jockin again from TypeThursday, and I'm really happy to have Daria from Berlin joining me to talk about her typeface that's on Future Fonts. I believe it's called Zangezi. I had it before off the recording, but now we're recording, I missed it. But we have her typeface from Future Fonts on, and really excited to have her join the call. So Daria, welcome for joining us.
Hi, Thomas. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So her typeface is on the top, as you can see up here. Let me mark it up for you guys so you know which we're talking about. And what we do in Fontribute, we do a comparison review to understand the typeface in question. So I saw some similarities here to Matrix 2 from Emigre, so I featured that up. I got it from Font Stand, always great source for renting fonts. And let's get into the details. So let's go explore some typefaces. So I jumped right in with we did with the N. Some of the first things that caught my attention was both of them are having these kind of Latin serifs, these very triangular shapes. Both of them are doing that, as well as apparently based on the width of the letter, or especially it seems to be the case in Zangezi, that it has a bidirectional serif on the bottom, and then a one-directional serif on the right stem, this side right here, which Matrix is also doing as well. There are some differences, though. For example, on the flag serif, there's a more traditional flag serif approach in Matrix 2. We know this by the triangular shape, versus this flat-sided top on the X height zone of Zangezi, as well as the nature of the joint leading to the shoulder. So if you notice in Matrix, it's really flat in the joint area over here, and then it seems a slight calligraphic transition moving into the stem. Meanwhile, Zangezi it seems to be more. Well, one is definitely there seems to be a gaining, like a different trajectory of the outer contour to the inner contour over here in the joint area, and just the whole shape of it's just more circular in approach versus this more angular approach over here in Matrix. So those so far are the attribute differences too. Oh, and one last one is you can see a much deeper cut in this area right here of the stem to the joint moving into the shoulder in Matrix versus this area right here. So again, that's something I'm going to be curious about and watching for later in the project. One last note I'm seeing too is the length of the serifs is pretty significant difference. Right, compare that length to this length. Very big difference there. So those are my observations so far. Daria, is there anything I misrepresented or something else you'd like to add from what I saw?
Well, yes, as you mentioned, Zangezi is more circular, and that's what I was mostly interested in this project, to combine this sharp wedgy serifs with this oral I cannot pronounce it, circular filling. Perfect. So I like how it works together. Maybe it's just yet polished, but it's very exciting.
Cool, perfect. So let's move on.
Yep.
All right, so now it's funny. So like the end, there was a lot of similarity, and then in the O's it just goes completely different directions. So I think that I'll start with Zangezi. The clear one is, well, there's a couple things. One is the asymmetry in the weight distribution. There's a much stronger area on the left side than the right side over here versus the symmetrical weight distribution on the heaviest part in Matrix. Another one is the stress. Notice where the thinnest parts are is in this angle, where if I direct it this way, basically a vertical to a slanted angle stress in Zangezi. We're seeing those 2 points together. So those are probably the two most dramatic differences between them. Daria, you made a little sound before. Is there something happen? I know, by the way, everyone knows Future Fonts is work in progress typefaces. So there might be a possibility where there might be adjustments or modifications between versions. And if you notice, this is version 02 in this case. Mm-hmm. Is that the case, by the way, Daria, or something else you stood out to you?
I think it's important to mention that this is originally a revival is an old keystone specimen from Philadelphia, if I'm not wrong. So many of these obscurities are coming from this old typeface, which wasn't yet revived, which is surprising for me. So now it's alive.
It's coming alive. Yes, and I talked this with Daria off the record, but before we start recording, that I'll be posting a link to that source so everyone knows what historical source we're talking about.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So let's, from those points, the party continues. See, it's not like Matrix is not crazy or fun with its G. It really is. But the party really comes here in Zangezi in this one. So one thing is we can see, again, the asymmetry of the weight in the bowl, right? Maintaining the O we're seeing applied in the G. This is also, from the O approach in Matrix applied in this case in the G. The ears are very different. Now this E is so fascinating. It's this like stem with a triangle added on. It's great. Versus if you could approach the difference of the ear in Matrix 2, this kind of much more triangular kind of smooth transition from the bowl into it. The neck is very significantly different. This perfectly parallel straight stroke in Matrix versus this angular approach. And what's interesting is, again, this move of this really thinning in this main stroke over here versus the predominant gain of weight over here in Matrix. Zangezi instead gains a predominant amount of weight in this section right here I'm circling instead. Now, both seem to have this flared approach. First, with the open loop, both have open loops with this kind of flared triangular shape at the end. Their drawings are different for both, but they're both thinking in the same way. I can see some similarities in this too. Daria, is there anything particularly about your G that you wanna talk about that we should know about?
Oh, I'm very excited about both of them. I cannot say which one is more crazy. Well, actually, I don't have anything to add. So I give all the craziness in this to unnamed designer of the work, because I couldn't have come up with such a shape. Yeah. So
yeah, that's a great
question.
This is
not my
your credit. You just took from the source. You carried over. Yeah. So actually, that's a good question. Did you have a full representation of all the letters to pull from for this revival, or was there any particular ones you had to invent yourself?
Oh, there were a few.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So
words. Only, and I imagined how could other letters look like, especially the numbers. I found the real numbers of the original typeface, but they are quite different and quite boring, so I'm happy with my numbers.
Excellent. Okay, so you did do some artistic interpretation or additions here.
Yeah, a lot. Because, well, first I just digitize it very, very close to the origin, and then I realized it's not quite useful, so I sent out some irregularities and so to make it more useful.
Cool. Okay, great. So let's keep moving on. So the A again. Yep. So in the A now we got to see some fun differences. So clearly one is the proportion of the bowl, right, to the main stroke elements, right. Matrix is much more even-handed in its approach. This is within general traditions I would expect the C and A like this. Zangezi really plays up with this. One is just its proportion, like how short this terminal is, right, versus how big that belly gets out instead. And its whole shape and proportion is much more circular. Actually, your notes before, Daria, about the sharpness versus the roundness play, right? We can see that in how this terminal is handled, in the terminal down here in the and on the tail, versus how this bowl is handled. I can see clearly your mission, your visual aesthetic being played out in this form so far.
Yeah, I really like of these two bellies. So one is going up and this one is going down. It's really funny.
Yeah, the momentum's very different. Excellent. Very cool. All right. On to another fun one. So we're sensing a pretty much a theme, systematic theme in the rounds, that there seems to be this move of really heavy on the bottom section, much lighter zone on the upper one, but all on an angle stress. We're seeing that across the board. And Zangezi with Matrix, more vertical, kind of more for vertical control, much more kind of tempered. So you can, I think putting these pairing together, part of the reason why I did so was to really emphasize how dramatic Zangezi's moves are as a result. So yeah, and you can see again, the clearest way we know the stress angle difference of the two is how these terminals are handled in the E between the two. Also, another aspect is the width. This width of this E is pretty wide, especially this top section. It might be because of this fact that this didn't gain weight to like over to here, for example, is what we would normally expect. Maybe that gives that sense of this E feeling so wide. But the overall impression I'm feeling is much wider shape than in the Matrix edition so far.
Right, Zangezi has more. So all the round letters are really, really wide.
Yeah,
I'm not that sure if it's good or bad. So it's on its first. So let's see how it works.
totally. Well, yeah, that's part of the investigation. We're gonna get to words, so we'll see how this all plays together. So I felt like this design really behooved itself to show the capitals in some way, because I thought there were very big differences. In the lowercase, it seemed like there were some similarities, but in the capitals, I felt some very big differences. One is the widths, right? Notice the much narrowness of the Matrix C capital versus the wideness of the Zangezi. But also, again, there's a very strong vertical energy versus the slanted energy approach. Also, both have these kind of angular serif treatments, but Zangezi, first of all, has a sheared, angled approach on this one, and also this kind of spur energy, the spur kind of serif on the top, which is much more dramatic. It's like it takes some of the thinking of Matrix, but really takes it to 11, like really amplifies it, which I think is really fun, really exciting. So I just want to take a note to just show this with the capitals so far. And likewise with the E. Yeah, so actually I always want to show the E in comparison to that is to show the dramatic change of widths, right? So this is much more narrow an approach, this E. In fact, it's like there's a little itty-bitty horizontal stroke on that crossbar of the E before the triangular serif gets drawn over here, which we can, and the proportion difference between the two, we can see like how much larger the shape is in approach versus the Matrix approach. Yeah, and again, the really strong. It's almost like Fletchman, like Kit. I think Kliss type designers, like that kind of Dutch era serif approaches. It's very dramatic, very over the, very strong in their directions. It's just a very strong difference in approach versus the much more quieter approach in Matrix. You were saying something before about the capitals. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Oh. Well.
Daria, are you there?
So this serif is a big pain for spacing, but I still like it. I like this.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. I'm curious again. I'm very curious to see how that's going to play out in settings, especially because it's kind of an underbite, right? Because kind of like where this serif ends is so much sooner than the bottom. So this bottom is just jutting out everywhere.
It needs some break.
Yeah. I also think it's fascinating. I know, and again, I see you trying to attempt the smooth sharp dynamic with this this curved transition here and here on the inside.
Oh yes. Yep.
Yeah. So I see that. You were saying? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I just said it's important for showing it.
Very cool. Okay. So
yes.
Let's continue. So I take it again, this was an example from the source, this R.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, no, no, no.
No, you made this. This is yours.
Yes.
Ah.
The original one is just a shaped thing, which is going deep under the baseline. I wasn't happy with this, and then I was trying a leg like this one, just a straight leg with a triangular surf on the bottom. But it was somehow way too dark and boring, so I came up with this one, which is not quite logical because this downstroke should be actually should be heavy. But so far I think it works because it has a lot of weight here. So I think it compensates the lack of the weight in the diagonal.
Yes, it's very, very particular. Yes, I definitely saw that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be watching. We'll definitely be watching for that. Some other notes just to show is notice the sharp transitions in the counter inside the matrix R versus your attempt to continue the smooth transitions, right? Kind of this, and really strong calligraphic feeling with the weight distribution up here in this section and a little additional section right here. So again, this R caught my attention.
It's kind of a mixture of calligraphic approach and more conservative approach.
Yeah, kind of drawn, exactly, calligraphic versus the kind of design drawn aspect. Yeah, I would agree. Okay, so now we start mixing up the capitals and lowercase. Yeah, so I mean, one general note I can see clearly is the kind of matrix is a much more conservative approach in their serifs. They're not as dominating the design. Yours are much larger in size. And obviously, and usually the serifs are usually larger in the capitals and lowercase. So like you can see this clearly in this example here. Yeah, it's interesting. It seems your design seems your straight letters like the N, in this case the H, is narrower than in matrix, but your rounds are much wider than in matrix. So the proportion shifts seem to be very different between the two.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Very cool. You can also tell that, but their general system of contrast too is relatively similar. Like if I look at the thick-thin relationships of this H, they're relatively close. I think yours is slightly higher, but not by much in contrast. I think they're pretty much comparable, I would say. So those are notes we can talk about. I always like getting accents. I think they're always fun. I think what caught my attention the most fun was this question mark. It was outstanding. I have to ask.
It was done by accident, just some points, and I liked it, so I kept this little. I don't know where to put this. It's not a serif, not a stem, just an accident. But I like it.
I think what I would have expected would be like something like that, right? Kind of like end it at the period. That's what I would expect. It would still look weird like crazy, but that's what I would expected. You chose the option of way past it. So I'm curious how I'm going to look forward to see how I said text with a question mark in it just to see how it's going to look. So I'm very looking forward to seeing that. I think another note is so what's interesting too that I always like pointing out is punctuation, right? So your commas and quotes, how they're approached. Notice this kind of like circle and like this kind of I call it like the ice cone effect. Like there's a scoop of ice cream and then there's a cone on these question. Right. Yeah, on these approach, which kind of create this round sharp effect. What you chose to do was again to create this kind of fanging effect of this arching stroke feelings. But then compensate for that with this sharp terminal endings for these, like on the bold section instead. I'm curious, what was your decision-making process for this approach versus I call the ice cream cone effect?
Well, this is clearly a display typeface, so I want to have all the notation and also all the decretional and marks. Yeah, so I think they just work better than more simpler one like this.
Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah, I would note also, yeah, generally your stuff is much larger, right? Like if you look at these accent marks versus your approaches, much larger in proportion. Like they're taking much more dominant space. You can definitely take notice of that. Also, as a fun note, I noticed that your diaryses and periods, for example, well, one is that this is going, I sense a stress, like a slight angling stress, like almost like them in slanted, drawn this going this way in the diaries, but in the exclamation and question mark, they're going the other way. Those that I think that's an intentional move.
It's in, well, I try to have them same as the dots. So the periods they also have this stress, like this points. But it didn't look right. So I just decided to flip it without any logical. Without any logic.
I think there's some. I could think of justifications about why you would choose to do that.
Maybe to compensate this momentum.
Yeah, that'd be my first feeling about that. Yeah, but cool. I'm glad I was not seeing things. I'm glad I was correct on that. Cool. All right. So also the numbers you talked about. So these are your inventions, and you decided to go full crazy on it.
Yes, I'm proud of these numbers. About the letters, I have some concerns, and well, it needs work. But numbers, I like them, even though I have to admit.
And you said the general number, the original numbers from the source were much more toned down. They're much more simpler.
Yes, they were more like these numbers of the metrics, just normal common numbers.
Cool. Yeah, just a note to notice that Daria's numbers these are aligning figures, so they're up to the cap height. Meanwhile, matrix is also numbers. So we see this because the position of sizings, right? Some numbers are higher, some are lower, some are going the baseline. Also, this font did have numerators and denominator numbers as well. So I don't take note of this. So you can kind of sense clearly that there's usage differences here going on too, right? So the kind of numbers you draw and the kind of glyph set you draw out to is contingent on your intention. So what you're trying to design for. So this was clearly meant for fun craziness, and I think this 8 is a great example of that. This is like almost the perfect union of your sharpness and roundness brief, perfectly expressed. Really strong angular energy on the top, curvature draw on the bottom, and you're even playing with. Actually, they're both playing with a non-calligraphic stress. If you notice, these are both vertical stress basically. Right, the heaviest parts are on the outside, left and right parts, right, and they're getting the thinnest at the bottom. Well, you're doing a little inversion on the top section for yours, but Matrix is definitely playing that, like so. So like this versus. Watch my amazing trackpad drawing skills. That's on trackpads, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be here all day. Anyways, yeah, just take note of some of the stress differences you can see drawn in this 8 especially. But it does change. For example, in the 8 and 9, the stress has been reintroduced here. The 5 a little bit. The 3, yes. And the 8 as well. Actually, the 0 you also played with the asymmetry of weight. You chose maintain from the the heaviest part in the bottom left, but a different weight on the upper right. So I do, in general observation, I do sense some consistency with your system so far. Although one note I do want to ask about, I noticed that you don't have any serifs on the 7 and the 3 on the top. or the 5 in this case. Is there any reasons for that? Uh-oh. Daria, are you there? Oh, no. I don't know if Daria's on the call or not anymore. Her thing says she's there, but I don't hear her. So, this is quite a situation. Daria, if you might want to hang up and try up and call again, maybe we can get you back on the call through. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to keep moving forward because we're all recording, we are live with this, but hopefully Daria can hop back in and we can talk more about these numbers, or the rest of them I'm going to go with the observation. So moving on to, and how it's setting it, now we actually have to set in type settings. So, I mean, clearly, as you can tell, this was not meant for text settings, because one, there's a much more regular rhythm and pacing and color effect in the text settings in Matrix. Meanwhile, we get this really kind of heavy weights here, and the capitals. Proportion shifts are pretty dramatically different, like the E to the X, for example, or even the G to the O. Compare those two. You know, if anything, this actually demonstration shows clearly Matrix strength is in this text setting environment. It seems to hold up pretty well. I actually would say in these cases, I think they were a little timid on their commas in this case, or even older punctuations. They were a little delicate in their moves. I think they actually could have been a little more generous in their sizings of that in Matrix. But definitely in Zangezi, we're really seeing the strongness of the design variance of width and the changing of the weight proportions, like where the heavy parts are versus the light parts are. In fact, there are some letters that do feel a little heavy, like this R feels dramatically heavy compared to the E, or maybe the E that feels too light, or the A feels too heavy. There are some sensing some weight issues a little bit, but I know Daria's still working on it. But clearly, I think this is where this would shine stronger, is in a display setting, as we're seeing here. So nothing wrong with Matrix. It's perfectly reasonable and adequate in its approach, but definitely if you want more oomphy power in this genre of a Latin serif, you would go with Zangezi Matrix. Zangezi, excuse me. So you can see really here the strong axis weight play. Even these R's really play out, really give a really distinct feeling about it. Even you see other letters now talk about this asymmetry, this proportion changes in the S versus this S, for example. And again, the C, kind of how strongly dramatic it is versus this approach over here. And it goes for the G as well, as you can see here, in addition. And again, the variance of width. Notice how narrow this T is versus the more wider approach here, for example. So I think let me scroll through, lost pages. Let me get through to the end for you all. Give me a second. Technology. Okay, so yeah, so basically what we can conclude with is they're both Latin serifs. They both have a general approach that seems relatively similar in their straight lowercase letters. But once we get to the rounds and the lowercase, things start getting crazy, and you start seeing the really strong differences in the approaches. I do think there are some weight issues. This will be resolved specifically in the uppercase to the lowercase relationships, but even also in the lowercase to in Zangezi. But if you really, it's almost like if you were really working on a project, I could see you really using Matrix 2 for the text copy purpose settings, but then using Zangezi for the display purpose, like for the headers or something, we really want a dramatic editorial effect. So with all those considerations in mind, you know, think of these two as kind of their sisters related to each other. One is the really dramatic, crazy one, and one is the more tempered, conservative approach. But I think both are very reasonable and exciting approaches. I am sad that we lost Daria, and then halfway through the call.
She's back.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I was fighting with the internet. It's just goddamn internet. It has just gone.
Oh, the
sorry for that.
It's quite okay. As you can tell, I had to keep moving forward. But what I was closing with, I'll just say again for you, Jari, to leave your following comments and thoughts with me on this, is they're both Latin serifs and are thinking in that model. There are some similarities in the lowercase letters, especially in their approach. But yeah, from there, it's a lot of deviations in both the weight distributions and how the upper and lowercase pair with each other. Basically, it's almost like I can imagine someone using Matrix 2 in a body copy setting environment, but then using your typeface and Zangezi for the display editorial purposes. They seem to be very close. They could work very well together in that relationship. I did comment that I thought, reviewing the text settings, that there were some weight issues to be resolved and how the pairs work together. But overall, I think yours is a very fun, dramatic approach of a typeface, and that really, you would go with your project, you wanted something really quirky and dramatic and standing out, which is, I think, the whole purpose of the project in the first place.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, even though I missed some of them. I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so upset now.
It's okay. I mean, it's the best we can do for technology. But I do thank you for being on the call. So everyone who watched this recording, thank you so much for being part of us and being part of TypeThursday and Fontribute. Be sure to check out Daria's work on Feature Fonts. There's a link to check it out. The way Feature Fonts works is, as she works on the project, it's a pay as you go. Once you pay into the font, you get all the updates for free going forward, and the price goes up as more features and improvements happen. So you're encouraged to buy early to encourage type designers to work on these projects, and you get rewarded with an early access and cheaper access to fonts in general. So definitely go support your local typeface designer. we always need support for each other. Again, Daria, thank you again for being part of this conversation on Fontribute.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. Exciting.
Awesome. All right, great. Take care, everyone. Have a great time. Have a great week, and see you next time. Take care.